Yay, we're live, and we have a guest of honor this week. Naiko, it's great to have you on and to keep us company between me and Nate. Last week we had Carlini, this week we have Naiko. Like, we're getting on a roll here, so that's good. Thanks so much for being here, both of you. And hi, Naiko, how are you doing?
Hi everyone, thanks for having me. To be truthful, it's an honor being here. After having watched like so many of those streams, I'm quite happy to be here, and also in such a good company. Like, you guys are legends.
Cool. Yeah, glad to have you.
Super. So I think like Nate already hinted the topic of this week. It's probably going to be the infamous ERC-721 bug that has been kind of on everyone's tweets this week. So yeah, I think let's get straight on it and start chatting about it. What happened there? Nate, do you want to start?
Yeah, so I wanted to do there's not like a whole lot of things that are really going on here, but I can see why people are confused, and that's why I wanted to do like a little mini thread on it or whatever, and I just kept being lazy or procrastinating it. And then whenever you had kind of suggested maybe we'll just talk about it, and I thought that that actually might be the easiest way to explain what's going on, because it's not super complex, but it's really more like the visual tools that are kind of misleading people. So the simplest, easiest way to explain it is that the UIs are just saying the wrong thing, that they're not set up to pick up this kind of weird instance. So what you really kind of have here is the contracts are modified or broken, or maybe not even that. But the first problem is that on Rarible, if you do I guess I would call it like a mint to. So let's say, I think the best way to explain this. If you have a contract, normally the way it works is, or let's say you're an artist and you have your own artist contract and you mint your tokens. They're getting minted from 0x000 to your address. And then the way that UIs have kind of rendered that is they said, okay, the first transfer from 0x0 to this address, that must be the artist, the creator of that token. So there are other ways to do it. You don't have to just mint to that person. You can mint to an address. We actually do it in NFT Box's project. And I didn't even realize that it showed like this, but if you go to Rarible and you look at the NFT Box NFTs, it will say the ones that you own, it'll say that they were created by you, which is not really accurate. They were minted directly to you. They weren't created by you. You weren't the one that called the function. So I think that that's really more of a UI thing. But this whole, what do they call it? The sleep minting, which is, I think it's a catchy name. That's why they go with. They're just trying to stir up a bunch of bullshit. But it's they're minting it to, in this case, they minted it to Beeple's address. So then the UIs display it as if he was the one who minted it or created it, which isn't true. You can see it in the transaction history that a different address submitted that transaction. And
so I'm just because you just mentioned it, and I actually remember seeing this on my account on Rarible, that this is one of the NFT boxes. I think it's last month's, and actually it says owner vertical, creator vertical, which is essentially not true. It's exactly what you said, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes. So I think that there's some, maybe the way that they call it, it's a UI thing. It's something that maybe they hadn't ran into before, so they didn't have a need to sort of distinguish it. It's still, the history there still shows that transaction initiated from, in this case, it's a bot that's run by Owl Moistness. That address is the one that initiated this, but really and then I guess who is the creator in that instance? Is it T-Box team, or is it the person who uploaded the mold here? So I don't know necessarily that it's
Mhm.
super clear, and maybe that's why they chose to go this route. Whoever the first person to get it is the one who minted it. But anyways, so the person who did the sleep minting thing or whatever, he minted it to people's, or she minted it to people's address, and then they had in their contract that they wrote, it's not verified, so this is kind of speculating, but this is the way that I assume that it works. There's some sort of master overriding type functionality. Usually you can do a contract with like the owner of the contract has functionality that public members don't have. And in this case, that person has created the owner of the contract can actually call transfers. They can call burn. And so, I mean, that's essentially all they've done. They've just created a special case contract to be able to transfer on behalf of other people. And then they started off by minting it to two people. So they minted it to his wallet, then they transferred it out from his wallet. And when I say that, this is, well, I'm not going to go too deep on this. I'll let you ask questions. And essentially what happened is the contract has some functionality that doesn't usually exist. This has nothing to fucking do with 721. It just is, you're able to, basically when you write a smart contract, you can do anything. You can tell it that you can make the functionality whatever you want. So that's not normally how it works, but I can send you an NFT and I can pull it out of your wallet. And that's sort of the way we think about NFTs, that they get transferred like that. But really what happens is you're just updating at the smart contract level, and then UIs just try to interpret that information. So what really happened, it's not like it was in your wallet and he pulled it out of your wallet and sent it to somebody else. It's just he can interact with the smart contract, and instead of you being the only one who could transfer it, he also could as the owner of the contract. Some technical weed
Okay.
stuff. This is why I'm fascinated with it. It is hard. It is kind of hard to explain exactly. There were some other people that had simplified versions, and I thought, oh, that's a pretty good explanation. That's better than I was thinking of how to explain it.
Naiko, do you have anything to add or any questions about this?
Yeah, I think so. So I would go actually even deeper. So I agree with everything Nate said. So basically, for me, the very first problem is that when you mint something, as Nate said, you can mint it to someone else's address. So it goes from 0x000 directly to someone else's address. And that's okay. But platforms should not allow you to mint it to someone else, I feel. Or if they do, then like Nate said, they should change the way they word what's on the platform. So they shouldn't say creator, they should say first owner or something.
Yeah.
Then the second thing is, again, like Nate said, the guy probably had I had like a really quick look, and I'm not an expert, but from what I saw is he has his own contract, and basically he just, when you transfer in the ERC-721 standard contract, when you do transfer from in the function, when you transfer the NFT, the first thing that's in the function is checking if you're the owner of the token. And he basically just added something saying that you can either be the owner of the token or the owner of the contract, for example.
Yeah.
And there it is. You can pull out the NFT. So it's very simple, but it does highlight a platform UI issue, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a question here which says, so that contract was written badly. I don't get how there were two NFTs created.
So they're two actual separate NFTs. One is the one from the auction that actually sold for 69 million. Then the person who's claiming to have pulled off this heist or whatever, they created their own contract, and they, I wouldn't say it was written badly. It was written specifically for this kind of controversial shitstorm. So like Hiko said, you have he has special functionality where he, instead of just the owner of the token being able to transfer it or burn it, or whatever other functions that he has in there, he also require that you're the owner of the token or the owner of this contract. So yeah, and this actually does tie in a little bit with like why it's so important to have your contract verified, and this doesn't mean that everybody needs to learn how to read Solidity, because and the way that it usually plays out is people who know how to read it will tell you how it's working if it is verified, and if you do have questions about how something is working. And then that's enough of an incentive to kind of, now with like the 8th first and then like research later mentality, maybe not so much, but that's sort of the idea is you verify the contract, which means that the source code that you put up on Etherscan compiles down exactly to the bytecode that was deployed to Ethereum. So you can be sure that that source code is actually what's running on the mainnet. But in this case, he didn't verify it, so we can't say exactly, but we can speculate that there's some sort of master override type thing, which essentially allows him to just, do whatever he wants to with the tokens that are on that contract.
Okay, and this contract was put on OpenSea and on Rarible, and it was there for a while. But how did that happen? Like, should it be that maybe smart contracts have to, like, whenever a smart contract gets created on a platform, and I don't know if this is even possible, I'm just asking out of like curiosity, they can be like verified by somebody on the platform to actually like see if everything that is being put is like, it's from a reliable source in a way, or is that like too much of a job for platforms to do?
Yeah, I would say that would actually be probably not the right approach. Because part of this is, being able to automate and be able to have this sort of decentralized structure where anybody can come and write their own smart contract, and, you can have your token show up on OpenSea and on Rarible, and anybody who is, following the ERC-721 standard and processing the information for that. So here, really everything for platforms, the way that it all works comes from the token URI function. So if you have a token URI on your ERC-721 contract and it has a link to an API with a JSON structure of the image and the metadata for it, then it's going to show up on OpenSea and it's going to show up on Rarible. There's not really anything that you can do about it with the system the way that it is. And I get kind of where you're going with this is, how do we prevent people from doing this and from tricking somebody that doesn't have a clue what they're looking at?
Especially for people who are coming in to, like for somebody who doesn't know how to read essentially like a smart contract, or just simply says, oh, okay, Beeple is on Rarible. That can be possible. Like, it's not like any of the other artists aren't on Rarible. Like, there's a lot of famous artists in the space that are minting on all platforms. So you could essentially think that Beeple is doing the same, right?
Yeah, I think that is, it's a fair assumption. And if you, I saw that OpenSea, they pulled down this contract. I don't know if Rarible did or not. And I don't know that it's necessarily, their job to do that either. I think really kind of like the thing that we have to get across and that people have to understand is what the distinction and what makes a contract the contract is the contract address. There's no way to fake that. So like CryptoPunk's address, OXB, I can't remember what it is. That's as far as I know. But that contract is always that contract address. It would be impossible for anybody to deploy. So even though I could take CryptoPunk's contract, I could clone the code exactly, redeploy it. I could serve up an API to both OpenSea and Rarible on it, and I could make CryptoPunks exactly identical. But what is different and will always be different will be the contract address that they originate from. I mean that, and obviously the timestamps that this stuff is originated at. But that is like the distinguishing that is the authenticity, I think, is the best way to put it. You can clone anything. I could clone avatars, I could clone chain faces, I can clone squiggly, I can do them exactly the same, but what would always be the real one would be the contract address that is associated with the real ones.
Naiko, do you have anything to add or comment on this?
No, I mean, Nate is saying everything. No, but I mean, I basically agree. And also in this case, for example, the dangerous quote unquote thing is that if you look at the Rarible page, for example, the Beeple profile that shows up is probably his profile, right? There's a badge, verified badge, etc. So as someone who doesn't know shit about this, you look at it, you see, oh, it's minted by Beeple and it's like 1 ETH or 10 ETH. That's super cheap, right? There's nothing that tells you, especially on Rarible, I think, that tells you that the contract is verified. On OpenSea, they did make first steps towards this, where they have the contract sometimes verified. I can't remember how many steps you have to go through and if it actually goes that deep, but at least they have the thing in place. So I think it's going into the right direction. There's definitely work to do, especially if we want to avoid freaking out mainstream people, because there will be an article on Forbes because some guy just gave a scammer $10 million or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I think that it is an important issue. I mean, I think it's kind of like been blown out of, or maybe not. Maybe it's got the reach that it was supposed to get because this is an important conversation, even though it's totally not really. It's not really valid. So like I said, I can clone anything. I could clone Beeple's contract, the one that he did on Maker's Place. I could just go to OpenSea, and use their storefront minter and upload the image myself, or Maker's Place, or I can go to any of these platforms, assuming that I've been whitelisted for their contracts if it's something like super rare, and just upload the same exact image, which would hash to the same thing, which actually I think that this hacker, or this, whatever you want to call them, they actually I don't even think that it matched the IPFS. They didn't even use the exact file. It looks the same, but it's not exactly the same, or else the hash would be exactly the same, because the hash of a given file will always be the same if it's the same file. That's sort of like the magic, and that's like what makes IPFS work so well, I think, is that, let's say I have a file, I've pinned it to IPFS, I've got a hash, and that hash is a token that's on Ethereum. 10 years from now, oh shit, it's not pinned anymore, but I still have the file. All I have to do is repin it, and then it'll be pinned on IPFS again with the same exact hash, and now the link is married up again. So shit, I don't even remember where I was going with that. That's but yeah, I think I don't remember. I'm sorry.
I think you were saying this is going, like, it kind of already, I think, got more attention. It should have gotten, also just because. So I had initially commented on the initial thread from an article talking about it, and then I thought, wait, why am I doing this? I'm just giving it publicity. So I took it back, and then I think Art Gnome tweeted about it. So I went full ape and just tweeted at him, like, why are you giving this publicity? And he responded very calmly, like, I'm just trying to start a conversation. So, and I think that makes sense. It's probably a conversation that needs to be that needs to exist. But I agree with Nate. There's kind of a balance to find between not giving too much attention to it, because just people are going to say, are going to go to the initial website or something and see, oh wow, it was stolen. There's actually 2 tokens. I can get the other one for cheap, and then end up getting scammed by him or something.
Yeah. Yeah, it's there is a balance here. I think that the headlines are maybe sensationalist, and that's sort of why it was so jarring for some of us. But I get the confusion. I actually knew even some veterans in the space that actually reached out to me on Discord and asked, and hey, what is this? And they assumed they kind of had the right idea in their mind, because I had actually talked about a while back. This was probably more than a year ago. I had talked about how it was interesting that you could mint from any address. So even the way that they did this is they took it and they minted from the normal minting address, which is 0x00, all zeros, to an address that they wanted to. But what you actually can even do is you can set it up to where you mint it from, say, Vitalik's address. So like, and his address is denoted on Etherscan. So it would look like he was the one transferring you all these tokens on Etherscan. Again, this is a UI thing, but it's because with smart contract, you can, instead of sending it from the normal address, you can set it to whatever address you want to. You could say Vitalik NFTs, and it mints from his address everyone that's created, and it would look like his public wallet on Etherscan was transferring you all those NFTs.
Maybe, just to jump in, maybe that could also be a good improvement for future standards, where we say the creator has to be like in the smart contract. The minting function automatically assumes that the creator is the person calling the contract or something. Or is it limiting too much the functionality?
Yeah, it might, because so like with NFT boxes, the distribution is from the team themselves. So for that one, they actually need that sort of mint to functionality, and that has to do with the team. Like when I talked to him, I told him like, well, you can make it where people are claiming their NFTs and they'll be the ones calling the function. But he had Carlini specifically had wanted to make it where the team was paying for those gas fees and they would mint them to people's addresses. But then it does make it confusing, because especially on like, I don't think that OpenSea really spells out the creator unless you call it out in the metadata specifically. So like autoglyphs, I know that they call out the creator, but that was the person who called the function and sort of had the RNG that tied to their autoglyph that so they did have that influence on the token, whereas normally that's not the case. But yeah, I think that may be too limiting. There would be some times when you wouldn't want to maybe enforce that.
So we have a question from Twitter comments. Actually, I'm going to pin it up here so we can all see it. But it says, I wonder with that type of minting, if it's a go for whitelist for burning ash in a few weeks. Whoops, sorry, you can't see it all. Wait. In a few weeks from certain artists, maybe a test run for that.
Let's see.
Let me see if you can see this. Yeah.
I'm not sure if I'm fully understanding what this question is asking, I guess. So
are they referring to Pax Ash token?
Yes, I think so.
Yes, think so.
So there with Ash.
Basically, she recommented, I wonder if that sleep minting will work around the whitelisting for the burn ash contract address.
Oh, no.
Short answer.
Yeah, because again, here, what the contract that, assuming whoever wrote this knows what they're doing, is what the contract is going to be looking at is the initial contract that minted the NFTs. And again, there's no way to fake that. There's no way for me to mint more CryptoPunks on the original CryptoPunks contract. If there was, then the whole thing would be fucked. There isn't. There is a way to make your own contract and mint your own CryptoPunks that are totally worthless clones unless you can scam people into buying them. You can upload the pictures on OpenSea's minting platform or Raribles tokens. And again, they would still be clones or not the real thing. So I think that the way that this ash contract would work is it would be looking at the contract that originally minted the cubes.
Yeah, also I think, or at least in the contracts I looked at, usually the whitelisting, like when you call the minting function at the point where it checks for if you're whitelisted, usually it checks if the caller is whitelisted, which makes sense. But then again, we end up at the point where we are still early in the space, and you have contracts written by people who don't verify it, or sometimes the code isn't even displayed in the way you can read it on Etherscan, for example. You have to decompile it, and some of the variables are not easily seen, so it's difficult to say.
Yeah, and actually this ties in pretty good to there's an ERC-20 Avastar's replicant token, the ART token, ART, and then so this was kind of this is something that Jim had came up with that he wanted to do because he didn't want to charge for replicants. He just wanted to have the ART replicant token come out with primes. There'd be a snapshot at the end of prime minting, and then you would get a certain number of ART tokens. And then whenever all the primes are sold out, then you could burn the ART tokens. But anyways, it was ART. And then there was another project that came out, and it actually came out before Avastar's replicant token was deployed. And this caused a whole controversy on Twitter, so that's why I was bringing it up. But it was the ART token as well, ART, exactly the same thing. And there was some kind of debate of which one was the real ART token, or you can't do that because we already claimed ART. The thing is if you go on Etherscan, and I think that they've changed their filtering a little bit, so it's not as easy to do it anymore unless they're like verified. But there was like 5 or 10 different ART tokens. So the name itself is not a unique identifier, and that will always be true. That just is inherent how this whole thing works. The unique identifier is the contract address. Again, that's what separates the two of them things. So I say that because, again, here with Ash, I could create my own Ash token and mint a shitload of, fake pack cubes and give myself 10 billion Ash. It doesn't mean anything that it's called Ash, because it wouldn't trade in the same, let's say, Uniswap liquidity pool as the real Ash. Same thing as if I were to create a token ETH and name Ethereum, I wouldn't be able to send it to an exchange and just print my own money, because it would say, well, that's not the real ETH. Or maybe that's a bad example because ETH isn't an official ERC-20, but any ERC-20, I couldn't just create BAT token, which is an ERC-20, and then send it to an exchange and it be tricked, because it would be looking at the contract address and saying, no, that's not the real BAT. Or actually doesn't even care what the name is. It just says, I don't recognize that contract address. I don't know what the fuck this is. It's worthless, whatever.
It's kind of like when you go on Uniswap, that it tells you, like, make sure that you're checking that this is the right contract address if you're buying any of the infamous shitcoins, as Nate called them. But it's kind of like the same, right?
Yes, and that is exactly. I think that's the easiest way that I can kind of think of to like put it in a term of something that would maybe make more sense. So this FUD, like when it came out, my thinking is like it is the same tier as somebody just creating ERC-20 Bitcoin, BTC, and then trying to or wrapped BT or whatever WBTC, and then trying to convince somebody that it's worth $60,000 or $50,000 or whatever it tanked to earlier.
Not anymore.
But yeah.
And also, I mean, at some point you're not able to fully secure it, right? Like, there's actually a story. Sorry if I'm drifting off, but I think it's interesting. In France, there has been some guy who was able to sell the Eiffel Tower to another guy. But obviously he didn't own it, right? But he was able to sell it and scam the guy. So there will
So
always be
can you
stories
tell
like that.
this story? Because
Yeah,
I think it's very cool. I know about it because a friend of mine told me, but Naiko, please tell it because I think it's a really cool story to tell.
So I don't know all of the intricacies, but basically the guy was a genius. He was able to manipulate people, and he like called this guy to his office, said, "Yeah, did he say he was a mayor? I can't remember, but I think he was related to the Eiffel Tower in some way. That's what he was saying, and he was able to sell it for, I don't know, a huge amount. And the guy, I think the guy ended up knowing about it like a long time after that. But he did end up getting caught, I think. Maybe you know more about it.
I think it happened I think it happened more than once. It happened actually twice. Like,
did it? Oh.
and I guess Nate, you can help us out here, as you're famous for jumping into scams, but this basically happened like twice. Apparently somebody sold the Eiffel Tower not only once but 2 times, pretending that like he owned it for some reason. He managed to trick the people into thinking that he could sell the Eiffel Tower, and he got paid like an extortionate amount of money, and only got caught like really kind of later on. So it wasn't after like a while that people realized that actually, they didn't own the Eiffel Tower.
Well, whenever somebody paid for it, they, in their mind, did own it as far as they were concerned. It's not like they were going to move it to their front yard or anything. So they probably told people that they owned it, and people thought, what the fuck are you talking about? And then finally they realized, oh shit, this is stupid that I even believe that I own this. Yeah, I think that is along the same lines. I mean, I think this is a good story because it's along the same lines of the shit that's going on here. There was all the kind of FUD, like, like the thing that really kind of triggered me a little bit is that they were calling it, like, they were saying that it was a major like weakness in the 721 standard, and it has nothing to do with the fucking standard. That's so dumb. Like, it's literally, you can make a smart contract to do what you want. Well, okay, if we wanted to restrict it and say it has to be exactly this for all of these things, but then again, that's going to inhibit. Really, a standard should try to encompass, I think, almost as little as possible, but while still achieving like the core functionality that you're trying to do, because you don't want it to restrict, innovation. Like, again, if we had said it has to come, the only person who can mint it is the owner of the contract, and they'll always be set as the creator. You can't mint it to somebody else and stuff like that. Then there would be projects that don't exist because that's the way that their functionality is. That's what makes sense for what they're doing. So you wouldn't want to restrict that. But yeah, that's why it kind of annoyed me, is that they had said that was sort of how, or that it was like broken, and that just isn't true. It really is. I get why it's confusing. It's because the UIs are misleading people, and it's because the UIs maybe aren't usually dealing with that stuff.
But maybe so I think the way things are happening right now is the way it should be. Like, the steps we're going through, like, we're calling it out after it has happened and the guy tried it, and at some point people are gonna understand it, and then it spreads, and then it doesn't happen again until it happens. Maybe later. Maybe this is how it should be, right?
Yeah, I agree. It definitely kind of brings up some valuable questions that lead to, and as I was telling Naiko, like before the live, like that bring up an education piece, and just realizing and understanding that there are some factors that are important to know in order for these things to not happen, because the scams will always happen. Like, it happens in the real world, it happens in NFTs, like it happens anywhere. But it's just about realizing how to figure it out and how to, I guess, protect yourself, like as you would with your credit card, kind of the same with NFTs, right?
Yeah.
I think there's somebody who knows a little bit about this Paris Eiffel Tower. So they say they made it look like the government was selling in secret meetings to avoid bankruptcy. So it was going to be secret. And when the buyer realized they were scammed, they were too ashamed to go to the police.
Yeah, I remember that part. Yeah.
So they were able to do it twice.
Crazy.
Wow.
This shit is crazy. The guy is a genius, an evil genius, but Jesus Christ.
But I guess my next question, whilst I was thinking about this, is like, okay, so for example, for like, let's say on Uniswap, like you obviously get a message saying, make sure that you're checking that the contract address is the right one before you buy any token. How can we translate that in NFT marketplaces? Because there's nothing that when you're buying something says, you know, make sure that you're checking the contract address, right? Like you can't, nobody really tells you to do that. So unless you actively go proactively do it, it's an easy way in, right?
Yeah, I mean, because I can understand the appeal. Like if you thought that you stumbled across people's secret rareable drop and it was only one ether, you're not going to go ask people about it because you don't want them to buy it before you, maybe. So, I mean, really, I think that education is kind of the only way that we can kind of get it out there. You just, this conversation, it will hit however many people it hits, whether it's 10 or 20 people that understand what we're, saying. And then when the next time this kind of round comes around, those 10 or 20 people can say, no, that's actually not what's happening. This is what actually is happening. And then it just sort of grows from there. And then before long, it becomes kind of a thing. Like, I can't imagine, with like the Uniswap thing, I think the reason that they really need that disclaimer there is because people didn't understand that just because a token was on Uniswap, that doesn't mean like anything. Like, if a token is on Coinbase, you can feel pretty confident that when you buy it, you're not going to go to sleep and wake up and it's going to be literally zero, no matter. Like in Uniswap, anybody can create a liquidity pool and they can own 100% of the liquidity and they can pool that liquidity at any time. And that's why I think that Uniswap had to make that distinction, because some people didn't understand that. They thought, this is Uniswap, it's this safe exchange, it's on Uniswap, it must be legit, blah, blah. And, maybe, along those lines, that's what people think when they go to OpenSea or go to Rarible. Well, this is on OpenSea and they're legit, so this must be legit, also. It just, it needs to be known that that's just not really kind of how this works. I mean, anybody can create anything. They can, have control of this stuff. I mean, really, you can feel free to, I would say if you're not sure, you should ask somebody maybe, rather than hoarding what you think is a diamond that you stumbled across, because, if you don't know what you're doing, that just makes the whole thing a lot more risky, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And that's probably also where crypto Twitter finds all his values, or part of it. Just because people will help you, people will look into it and tell you more about it, more about how it works. So you should definitely do. I mean, the risk reward is definitely more appealing. Like you should ask before aping as much as you can, unless you can afford to, and then you shouldn't complain about it.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I don't think that there would be many scenarios where you've stumbled across a hidden gem. It's more likely that you've stumbled across somebody trying to trick you, I would say. More, I mean, I can't think of, like, my example is this shit that I talked about, whether it was, I think it was last week, that honeypot contract. Like, it should have been so fucking obvious. Like, I didn't find something that would allow me to make this free money. It was a trick within inside a trick, and I thought that I outsmarted it. I mean, I guess I also knew that it was something that it was not presenting itself as, but I should have also known there are people that know this shit more than me. I didn't just stumble across a gold mine. I actually am getting tricked.
Yeah, I think like there's a big piece around education, just like basics, like very basics, that maybe should be something that is posted somewhere, like on the marketplaces, in each marketplace, that basically just explains, what you're going into. To just give you like an idea, like obviously like crypto Twitter, as you said, Naiko, like 100%, I completely agree. Like whenever, you're wondering if something is too good to be true, it's probably too good to be true. And, you shouldn't go all in and ape. But at the same time, like there's, there's a whole other kind of, maybe you don't know who to reach out to. Like maybe you don't know people like Nate or like you or like Loop, like a lot of the kind of like the pillars of crypto Twitter where you can ask. So there comes a bigger kind of question on like, what can marketplaces do to enable more people to know what they're going into? Which brings me to my next question, which is like, for both of you, what do you think is probably the bigger risk of NFTs right now?
Oh, wow. Nate, you're first.
Just the biggest risk in general?
Yeah.
I mean, it's really broad. I mean, so right now the culture, and this happened in 2017 too. Let's just, and this will always happen. People who are opportunists are going to take advantage of easy money because it's easy money. So like in 2017, you had shitcoin ICOs, because people who were ahead of the curve, but not really super skilled. They just were ahead of the curve. They knew how to launch their own ERC-20 tokens. They knew, oh wow, this takes 10 fucking minutes. All I gotta do is change the name and change the decimal. Like, it's so simple. And then I'll just get somebody to do a fancy website that says we're gonna, build flying cars on the blockchain or whatever. And then we'll do an ICO and we'll make $50 million. And then after a year of basically hanging out on the beach, we'll say, oh, sorry, we ran out of funds. And that should happen in 2017. I think that the same thing has happened a little bit this year with the NFT boom. You've seen projects. So Hashmask, for what it was and how much money they made compared to like, some like longer standing OG projects, it feels a little maybe money grabby to be like, holy shit, like they cleared 10,000 ether. But I still kind of let them off the hook because they were like perfectly well timed, in the same way that maybe like CryptoKitties was, and the amount of money that they made in December 2017, and the reach that they had. But projects after them that said, oh shit, Hashmask came in, they had a shitload of influence, they brought in a ton of money, people are making money, let's launch our low effort shit clones and use the same pricing models and try to capitalize on this kind of greed and ape first mentality. And that's sort of where I'm going with this, is that there's sort of this mentality that, oh shit, I've heard a new project, I'm trying to make some money. If I actually take the time to like understand it and dive into it deeply, I'll be buying in the third tier, and then there's no profit potential at that point. So I need to just ape into this shit immediately. And I think that that's sort of the risk, is that we've gotten to this sort of place where if you're playing that game, you need to almost ape into the shit before you even understand it or before you know anything about it. And really, I think when you get there, you've kind of reached sort of a saturation point where, I mean, there's no money to be made. And we're seeing it even with these, what they call the bonding curve ones, this step price up shit. The first tier will sell out because people are hoping, well, as long as the second and third tier sell out, I should be able to mark it up a little bit. But no, that's what everybody's fucking do. And so, no, there's no opportunity there. There's not going to be really any good opportunities until somebody does something unique. That's sort of my takeaway on it. So, I mean, even though these other projects are similar in at least pricing to, say, like Hashmask, they have tried to capitalize on that FOMO ape first mentality, and that's sort of risky because noobs don't know the difference and they come into that. The other thing that I would say is kind of risky is people don't understand liquidity, and it's not an easy initially like intuitive thing. You just think. I mean, I remember all growing up, I'd see like, oh man, this Pokemon card sold for $90,000. It's worth $90,000 because somebody sold it for that. It doesn't mean that it's worth 90. It's literally as simple as what's the most money that somebody will pay for that exact card, and maybe that was 90,000 for the last person, but maybe the next person, if you're a seller, maybe the only person you can find to buy it is only willing to pay 60,000. Or if you don't give a shit and there's anxious buyers out there, maybe somebody will pay 120. That liquidity or lack of liquidity on these like collectible type items is something that's not easily understandable for a new person, I don't think.
Yeah, so I was, that's funny because I was going to say communication when you asked the question. And then by listening to you, Nate, I actually realized it's education. And that's probably what you're trying to address also. But with this live and the live streams in general you're doing. But I can relate to this, right? Liquidity, bonding curve, all of that shit, man. I know nothing about all of this. And you see it all over Twitter or crypto Twitter. And yeah, that's true. Like you don't know what you're reading. Like but you know it's important, and you have people telling you, yeah, this project is gonna blow up, blah blah blah. And I'm able to look into the contract, understand how it works, etc., etc. But I have no understanding whenever I see a web page from a token where there are words like liquidity, bonding curve, blah blah blah. I don't understand that shit, so I just rely on others, and that's probably, I mean, that's what we all do, right? When you log on to Facebook or anything, and there's a read the terms and conditions, nobody does. That's false. There are people who do, right? So we don't, but there are people who do it, and we rely on them to hopefully be able to voice their concerns when they have some, right? And I think that's what we're going to end up with in the NFT space, right? You can't expect everyone to be aware of everything that happens. You just rely on hopefully the media's relaying important information when it happens. No, at least that's my opinion.
Yep, I agree. And that is how this, at least at the Solidity level, it sort of plays out. I remember when I didn't know anything about Solidity, I had a friend who was like just a fucking expert in this stuff. So and I probably maybe annoyed him, but I would always, anytime there was some new shit that would come out and I wasn't really sure if I could trust it or not, I'd like get the contract address and send it over to him and be like, is this safe? Is this like, I need to know fast because we need to act fast. It's the same kind of shit that's going on now, right? But so I remember kind of being there because I could look at it and sort of understand it, but not at a high level know what was going on. So I needed sort of that expert person. And then he went by Wojak. So anytime that's what happened too, he would like come into the chat and he'd be like, "Oh shit, Wojak threw money in. It's safe now. It's safe. Everybody go. It's fine now." Like,
yeah, I mean, didn't we all have someone like that? Like,
yeah.
Shout out to Simon, by the way. Thank you for helping me out with Solidity. Even as a programmer, right? Solidity is, I mean, it's kind of a standard programming language, but it kind of relies on concepts that are inherent to the blockchain, which you can't expect people to just know because it's obvious, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah, you need someone to help you out. I think. I mean, I had someone.
Yep.
I have one last question, but I don't know are you guys tight on time, Naiko? Do you have to drop off, or are we
I'm
good?
all good.
Okay, cool. So I have this question, which I kind of got asked, and I wanted to ask you both. which is NFTs and copyright. So like NFTs don't mean copyright. Like the fact that you own an NFT doesn't mean that you own the rights to whatever you've collected, right? Am I right or am I wrong here?
So I've went down this rabbit hole a little bit, and I think that it's a great question. The rabbit hole that I went down with this was licensing, so specific to an NFT. And this is something that we were trying to figure out how this tied into sort of the on-chain mantra that we were going with. And we were trying to say, how can we do licensing on-chain? And ended up at kind of like a master licensing contract. And you would upload all the licenses to that contract. Or maybe people who wrote their own licenses we weren't really sure exactly how it worked. Would anybody be able to upload their own license or whatever? But anyways, when you create the NFT, the idea is that now in the metadata, you specify which license it is. And then it spells out clearly, yes, you can print 100 t-shirts of this, or yes, you can make $1 million commercializing this artwork that you own. But after that, then you have to pay us royalties, or you could spell it out. Right now, that doesn't exist. And this, I mean, I really think this is like a big opportunity space that nobody's really touching. We've talked about it. I've pushed the idea around a few people and they all go, oh yeah, man, that's so fucking cool. But then like nobody's really done anything with it. I expect that there will be clarity on that eventually. I don't know if I'll be one of the ones pushing that or if somebody else will finally carry the torch, but there should be clarity on that. Cause like for me, NFTs that I've done, my takeaway was like, I did them, they're yours. I literally don't care about trying to monetize them any further. I do not care about, and maybe that's the wrong attitude to have, because I know that like the CryptoPunks guys have taken a more strategic route to where they never really specified what the licensing was around them. And now that CryptoPunks are enormous, maybe they're sitting on $100 million brands that they own, and nobody else really owns it. They just, but that's never really been like the spirit that I've had. Like I'm always just like, fuck it, like. If you bought that, then that's yours, and you can literally do whatever you want to with it. But again, it's not spelled out anywhere. It's just my verbal saying of it, and that's really what you have everywhere. Somebody like Beeple, he doesn't want people commercializing his work. I don't believe he does, because the value of his own brand. Whereas somebody like me, who's more crypto anarchist, whatever, like. I just don't give a shit. So there's opposite ends of the spectrum. And the only way to really bring clarity to that is probably some sort of licensing. In the case that I was thinking about it, this is like on-chain licensing.
Yeah. So just jumping in real quick. I agree on everything, actually. So from my understanding, and I'm no expert, but the one of the contracts I've seen that mentions this is art blocks in the metadata. And the others, like when I remember looking at known origin, etc., it's in the terms and conditions where they say when you buy the NFT, you don't buy the license or something. Then the question is, because you could still buy the token through another platform than known origin, what happens? I don't know. This is not clear. But yeah, I'm in the same position. I wouldn't try to make money out of it another way than minting and then selling it. So I don't mind about the license. But yeah, it's definitely a subject, and I hope someone will address it. So Nate, you know what you got to do now.
Yeah. I mean, I this is something that I like got so excited about. Probably, well, excited in the most boring. Like I was like, this is going to be so fucking boring to have to do this, but it's like super important because it is. Back then, these like especially crypto artists in last year, they weren't making a lot of money. They weren't really thinking about what happens if I become $100 million brand. How do I monetize? Like they didn't think about that or care about that. But now that you've got big IPs coming in, they absolutely care about that shit, and they're the ones that are saying, no, you don't own the copyright. you just own the token. You can resell the token. You can't. Like my take, the way that I always like
Exactly.
thought, like I wanted it to be like, yeah, fuck yeah, like print T-shirts of the stuff that I've created, make the brand bigger. That's cool. Like, yeah, man, that's cool as shit. Like, I'm not gonna, you know, but I think that you have to spell that out. Especially, it's easy and it's a natural marriage using, let's say, a smart contract with a license on it, and then the token just says, I'm using license number 1. Well, what's license number 1? It allows you to do $1 million a year in commercialization. Anything under that is 100% yours. Anything above that, the creator takes, 20% of your, or whatever you write the license to be. The reason that I got stuck with it is I wasn't sure how modular the licensing contract needed to be. And this is where it gets boring as shit, because it's like, I don't know, I don't understand the nuances of the law. I can't really predict what that needs to be. I just know that it needs to be done, and hopefully somebody who has the right background can maybe figure it out. And then the tokens will tell you exactly what you can do with them. And actually, I think that there's value in that, because, like, let's say a Beeple token that gives you 100% commercial rights to it versus one that gives you no rights. I mean, which one is more valuable in that scenario? And I think that that's kind of cool that you have these extra layers on top of NFTs.
I completely agree. And it's something that I also kind of started to look into, and maybe went into the rabbit hole and kind of was trying to figure out as well within the different platforms, like what they have embedded in them that is like written in terms of like copyrights for the artists as well. I think like Super Rare has something in the contract which protects in some way or form like the artists. But ultimately, like I kind of got this question from somebody who is not into the NFT space and was looking into it and seeing NFTs as like a copyright agreement, whilst it's not, or not yet at least. But yeah, definitely like something interesting for somebody to do, like maybe even a lawyer who could potentially like come into this space and like start looking into these kind of things.
Yeah, I think it'll definitely happen. I mean, it's almost anybody that I've really talked to about this that actually understood kind of the goal of it was like, oh yeah, this is going to be big eventually. And actually, I had talked to people about this as well a couple months ago, and like he was really big on this. So that's why I know that because he cares about protecting his IP. And that translates into a lot of dollars for somebody who's that big brand already. So
yeah,
understandable. But I think that is that's why it needs to be kind of spelled out. I don't know that it should be at the platform. I don't think the platform should say any of that shit, because if I mint on known origin and they say, oh, it's not copyright, well, I mean, I'm not like a traditional artist. I don't mint on known origin. But if I did, I would say, again, the same attitude that I have is I don't give a shit. You can make T-shirts of it, or you can print 1 million posters. I literally don't care. Like, so that terms and conditions wouldn't apply to me there. But it would be nice to spell that out in the token maybe and say, legally, at least you have some footing to stand on. If I, in a year from now, see that you're making $1 million selling Chain Faces T-shirts and I come after you, you can say, well, on Discord you said, and maybe it would be better if it was on a smart contract where it says, no, this is the license here.
Yeah,
for
there's
sure.
definitely free room, in the description for sure. It's text you have written and signed, so maybe you can even write a whole contract in this. I'm not sure, but maybe like if the platform doesn't give you the tools, you can definitely write yourself in the description. You can do whatever you want with it, and that's something. I think so. Law is a shitstorm, I think. It's gonna be interesting for sure.
Cool. I think these are all my questions. I don't know if you both wanted to add anything else.
No.
All good on my side. Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Naiko, for joining, and thanks, Nate, as always. And yeah, it was great to speak. I think we touched on a lot of points, so maybe we'll have you on again, Naiko, to like expand on some of these.
Thank you so much for inviting me. And yeah, that was pretty cool.
Super amazing. Thanks a lot. Bye.
All right.
See ya.